Gateway to Hell, Book 1 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucera, Part 11.
Chapter 45. The Past Calls to Me. Ivarian shivered as the icy plain where the arrow of time stood reached for him again. Should I let it take me? He blinked to clear his sight, then recoiled as a red-skinned demon covered in hardened blood charged toward them. Rosalie stepped in front of him and raised a spear to intercept the creature. Could she fight this demon? She fought one before, but he couldn't see it then, so he didn't know if she could take this one on and win. The demon must be a foot taller than her and 50 pounds heavier at the least, but Rosalie stood her ground like a hero out of an old tale, and the blue and yellow lumer crystals glowing in the mosaic that covered the ceiling only added to that effect. The stone floor turned into the icy top of a glacier. If I let the arrow of time take me, then I'll have to leave Rosalie to face that demon alone. And he just couldn't do that. I left her twice before, but then she was somewhere safe. Now she was in grave danger. Surely he couldn't harm the timeline any more than his uncle already had if he just pulled her with him to that icy plane. That would get her away from the demon long enough for it to go away and bother someone else. Maybe Rand could wish it away. Where was he anyway? I could send her back here a few minutes later after the demon leaves. Then she'd be safe. Surely that wouldn't harm the timeline. I won't take her back with me, but it would be nice if she could come to the past with him. She was so strong. Perhaps she could do what he couldn't. As the presence slipped away from him, Ivarian slid an arm around Rosalie's ankles and pulled her down with him into the swirling wind and blowing snow of that plane outside time. She tumbled down after him, and he held tight to her ankles, dragging her down with him into the blinding white light of the arrow of time.
What did you do?
Hyrule all but growled as he shook his shoulder. Where's Rosalie? Ivarian opened his eyes in a panic, then calmed when he saw her lying in the snow. Her dark hair haloed her head until she sat up, and it fell in a messy tail behind her.
Where are we? What is this place?
Rosalie glanced around as she rose, her brow wrinkling as she took in the towering arrow of time, which provided the only light in this place.
You have to take her back.
Hyrule shoved himself to his feet and ran in front of Rosalie when she headed for the arrow of time.
This is somewhere you shouldn't be.
Oh really? Then why am I here?
Rosalie picked up the stick she was holding when he dragged her off to this place. She must have brought it with her. I brought you here. Ivarian tried to rise and just landed on his backside again. His legs refused to hold him up until Rosalie stalked over and extended her hand.
Here, let me help you. It looks like you need me to be your pack mule again.
You're prettier than any pack mule. Ivarian flushed with embarrassment. Did I really say that aloud? It was true, but his sisters told him he shouldn't comment on a woman's appearance unless she asked for his opinion, and Rosalie didn't. Rosalie laughed as she pulled him up.
I'm glad for that. So what is this place?
Somewhere you shouldn't ever go. Ivarian, you can't let her wander around here. You have to take her back to wherever she came from.
Hyrule waved to her. But now that she was here, Ivarian didn't want her to leave, and not just because she wrapped an arm around his waist and held him close so he could lean on her strength. That was only a small part of it. I tried figuring things out on my own. Maybe I need a partner to help me unscramble what my uncle did and fix it. To do that, they needed to get past Hyrule. Ivarian couldn't think of how to do that, when he could just lean on Rosalie and stumble alongside her. He didn't have the energy to do anything else.
Who are you, and what gives you the right to order him around?
Rosalie glanced from Hyrule to the stick she dropped when she helped Ivarian up. Was she thinking of picking it up? I don't like Hyrule, but I don't want her to stab him either. Ivarian bit his lip, then decided he better say something before this devolved into a fight. He claims he's my cousin, but I don't have any proof that he is. Ivarian glanced at the stick too. If he slid through her grasp and fell onto the snow, freeing her to act, could Rosalie knock Hyrule out?
Does she know who you are?
Hyrule pointed at him. No, she didn't, and Ivarian glared at him, willing him not to tell her. She didn't know and she didn't need to know because it had no bearing on anything right now. My uncle screwed up the timeline, not me. We're wasting time talking to him. How could they get past him? Hyrule stood between them and the arrow of time. The arrow of time glowed brighter as it towered over them, inviting them to come closer.
Pick a year,
it seemed to say. Perhaps it wanted Rosalie to stay too. We should go. Ivarian stumbled away from his cousin, forcing Rosalie to come with him.
Where are we going?
Rosalie pulled him closer and took more of his weight on her shoulders. Back in time. I told you I could time walk. Well, that thing over there is the arrow of time. We just need to walk over and pick a moment in time to go back to, and I can take us there. Ivarian scanned for the notches as they neared the long shaft of the glowing arrow. When he spotted them, he counted off 16 back from the head of the arrow of time.
I won't let you take her with you.
Hyrule ran past them and stopped in front of the notch he needed.
No one asked you what you think.
Rosalie veered to miss him and pulled Ivarian toward another notch. It wasn't the one they needed, but maybe it was better to go back to before everything changed. That would give me time to recuperate before I need to figure out what my uncle did, and it would give him time with Rosalie away from Ran and Mirren. They were nice, but they spent enough time with her, while I spent hardly any time at all with Rosalie, and a selfish desire to have some time alone with her without demons or metal centaurs or anything weird or magical overcame him, lending him the strength to run the few steps that remained. Exhaustion made the arrow of time split into 3 arrows, then merged together as he extended his hand and touched a random notch just out of Hyrule's reach. The arrow of time couldn't actually split. I'm seeing things again. Ivarian blinked to clear his sight as an icy shelf slid out, presenting a ton of frozen moments from that year to choose from. Ivarian touched the nearest one and pulled Rosalie down into the past with him. The world whited out, and Hyrule fell silent after shouting,
No.
one last time. Come what may, at least they would be together. Perhaps that would make all the difference in the end.
Chapter 46. Shards of Time. Long ago, the metal humanoid striding across shards of glass had a name and a purpose, but both were gone now. The Agent of Order crouched on the stone floor of a third-floor flat and peered out the window at the vibrating gateway below. A girl in a white dress and a red dragon appeared like ghosts in front of the gateway, then vanished again. But they'd reappear again because they were shadows of another time. Two timelines crossed right at that gateway. In that other timeline, two beings fought to take the gateway down and prevent anyone from crossing it. Human-shaped shadows opposed them, but they were too indistinct to make out. Only the girl and the dragon were clear until they disappeared again. Below, figures gathered on the streets leading to the intersection where the gateway landed. Some had hazy auras of power like the ex-god and fallen angels possessed. Some didn't because they were demons whose power came from within, not without. But all stayed back and schemed as they watched the gateway. That situation wouldn't last for long, though. They waited to see who created the gateway in case a more powerful entity claimed it. When they realized no one on this side of the gateway had any part in its creation, they'd converge on it. Perhaps they'd fight over it. The Agent of Order didn't want to wait for that, but he didn't want the Archangel to see him either. Thankfully, Azrael flew toward the library right now. I hope he leaves after that. He can't be comfortable here. Sparkling bits of time spun around the gateway. Hell has no time. Time wasn't supposed to exist here, but the Agent of Order stared at the basic building blocks of time where it shouldn't exist. But they stacked together, forming a ragged timeline as the sky flipped back and forth between the burning orange of day and the blackest of nights in an unending loop. The gateway split into 3 gateways. Each one drifted to a different place on the timeline. But the demons charging through the gateways didn't notice. They ran straight at the gateway as if there was only one, not 3 stacked one behind the other. Why is this happening? How can there be time here? The Agent of Order clenched its fists around shards of glass and squeezed them until they shattered. This wasn't order, and that was the answer. This is the Agents of Chaos doing. I need to get a closer look. Above, Azrael punched through the grey shield over Hell, and a sonic boom shook the ground. Show off. Thank God he's gone. The Agent of Order rose and jumped out of the window. It landed in a crouch before the gateway, and its power forced the 3 gateways to collapse back into one. It slashed its smooth metal hands through the air around the gateway, but it couldn't grab the bits of time floating around. That too was the Agents of Chaos doing. They loved chaos.
You see it too. I know you do,
said a hooded woman as she approached from the opposite side of the street. She stepped lightly on the rubble covering the ground, and as she glided toward him, her long white robes didn't brush the ground. Who are you? The Agent of Order stood its ground. It was far older and used a different power base than any angel, fallen or otherwise. There was nothing she could do to harm it, but she could delay it. Was that her goal?
I'm no one special, just someone who dislikes chaos as much as you do.
Under her hood, her eyes glowed violet like all angels did, but that could be an illusion to fool onlookers into mistaking her for a fallen angel. You're the one they call the sleeping angel, but you don't look like you're asleep.
Maybe I'm the dreamer, and this is all a dream. I could be the only one who's real here.
She shrugged like that was of no consequence, but it was a frightening proposition. Did you come here to stop me from crossing through the gateway? The Agent of Order pointed at it as more demons ran past them. But none even glanced at them. That was her doing, probably because the Agent of Order didn't bother to hide its presence anymore after the Archangel left. But a fallen angel would notice them if one came to the gateway. Eventually one would, and the Agent of Order didn't want one to see him. It was bad enough Argenial knew his kind still existed in the margins of the 12 realms, but Argenial couldn't leave Hell, and he had no reason to mention anything to anyone down here. Still, it was time to leave here and seek its enemies, the Agents of Chaos. I will wipe them from existence. Then the Agent of Order could rest. The gateway called to it. The Agent of Order could feel the chaos churning at its core, and it must correct that.
I did, but I changed my mind. You'd better go. Give my regards to the Agents of Chaos.
She stepped back and gestured to the gateway. What changed your mind?
I could spend considerable effort and energy preventing you from going, or I could save that and spend it on a much bigger prize.
What prize is that? This woman was intriguing. The Agent of Order studied her, but it couldn't figure out her motives or her plans. She pointed at the Library of Forbidden Knowledge.
I want the angel in the library more than I want you. He's more powerful than he realizes.
And you want that power. That was a reason it could understand, but the Agent of Order knew she wasn't telling it everything. But she was right. Argenial was a weapon. Where did she want to aim him? At heaven or hell?
Go now unless you want to deal with the fallen, because many are coming this way. I feel they're evil. It infects everything around them.
The sleeping angel drew back into the shadows thrown by the shell of the building across the street. Farewell. The agent of order heard the marching feet of an army as it ran toward the gateway. It didn't stop when it hit the threshold. It ran into the glowing tunnel and extended its wings so it could fly through the luminous tunnel that bored through all the realms between hell and the gray between. I'm coming, agents of chaos, and I will destroy you in every place I find you.
Chapter 47. Timelines Cross. Where's Rosalie and Ivarian? Rand glanced behind him, expecting to see the pair, but only people he didn't know followed him. Their scared eyes darted back and forth, seeking somewhere to hide, but there weren't any unless they wanted to duck behind a statue and hope the demons breaking through the exterior-facing windows would miss them. I need to find a safe place for them.
Aren't they behind us?
Uncle Myron glanced over his shoulder to check as he hobbled onward beside Rand. They might be farther back in the crowd. Rand couldn't spot their heads in a sea of them, and that was concerning because he was taller than everyone around him. He should at least see their heads if they were behind them. What if they aren't? Rand almost stopped in his tracks, but he shouldn't do that since his uncle leaned on him and he needed to take his uncle somewhere safe. I can't lose Uncle Myron. A lump formed in his throat just thinking about that. His beloved uncle had always been there for him from his earliest memory right on through to today, and Rand wouldn't let some demon change that. No way. So he strode down the hallway past the statues that flickered into existence and blocked his path. Really, those Litharians had some strange ideas about the proper placement of statues. They should stand off to the side so they don't get in people's way. But they didn't, not even when they disappeared again. Rand almost stopped again as the hallway wound around a bend lined with doors. What if Ivarian used his magic and sent himself away again? Yes, the guy was exhausted and still recovering from using too much magic, but that didn't mean he couldn't use his magic right now. Dad used to use his magic when he shouldn't, even though I told him not to. If he could, then Ivarian could too. Dad was stubborn, and Ivarian might be too. Of course, Rand shied away from thinking about how he shared that personality trait, but I'm only stubborn about the important things. Was Ivarian like that too? Rand didn't know him well enough to say, but Rosalie might be alone and trying to find them. Or maybe she fought some demons right now. That was probably more accurate. Rosalie was impatient and more than capable of slaying demons. But I'm not telling your mom she died on my watch. That woman is tough as hell. Well, there was one thing he could do to help Rosalie if she was fighting demons right now. Rand stuffed his free hand into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a white stone. His magic was a shining white ball inside him, and it sat up like an eager puppy, ready to do what he asked. I wish all the demons inside the 2 rings of standing stones were as insubstantial as smoke and just as unable to hurt people. Rand squeezed the stone and repeated this wish 2 more times for emphasis as his magic shot down his arm and into the wish stone. Then he threw it into the air. The rock floated above him as the wish sent out tendrils seeking the demons. Until it found them and anchored the spell on them, Rand powered it, and that was okay. It drained him, but that was only temporary because of the way his magic worked. Of course, his magic had limits. All types of magic did because that was the way of things. Wishes that moved things just required energy, so he was a little tired from the summoning, but not too badly off from it. Wishes that subtracted things like mass were the easiest to power because that mass had to go somewhere. Usually, it went back into the wish, powering it so it could keep going for a long while. Not forever, of course, because no spell could run forever. They all had an expiration date. Rand could also redirect some of that power to himself if he wanted to. He didn't because he didn't want anything that belonged to a demon anywhere near him. Rand shuddered at the thought of that. Nope, no demon energy for him. So he let the wish use their stolen mass to fuel itself. The hardest wishes were the additive ones because then the wish needed to get matter from somewhere to make the thing he wished for. I learned the hard way how draining those wishes could be. And Papa had lectured him for days after he cast that first one. To be fair, I scared the life out of him. So Rand avoided wishes that created things and stuck to moving or subtracting wishes instead. They were easier on him, and Papa didn't lecture him about those.
What did you do?
Uncle Mirren limped along beside him still. How do you know I did anything? Rand glanced at his scowling uncle.
Because I know you, but even if I didn't, that rock is a dead giveaway.
Uncle Mirren pointed at it.
So what did you do?
Oh, I just made the demons like ghosts. They can still scare people, but they can't hurt anyone until the wish ends. Rand shrugged because that seemed like the thing to do. No thanks needed, but he'd take a thank you if someone like his uncle offered it. He just used his magic to do the most good he could.
That was a good idea. How long can you keep it going?
Uncle Myron stared at the rock since it floated along, keeping pace above them. I don't know. Demons are magical creatures, and some demons have powers that cause interference. Rand glanced at the rock too, but there was no indication of how long the spell would hold. His wishes didn't come with obvious expiration dates. They just ended when they ran out of power or when he broke them, whichever came first.
What does that mean? Do we have a few minutes or a few hours before they get free?
Uncle Mirren leaned on his cane instead of Rand, and that was weird since Rand strode through the hallway beside him. I'm not an expert on demons, so I can only speculate that the more powerful demons will break free sooner than others. So we should hurry and get everyone to somewhere we can barricade like Rosalie suggested. Rand couldn't think of a place that met that criteria even though he lived his whole life in the vertical city carved out of Mount Eredren's innards. There must be somewhere, but the city under Mount Eredren was pretty big, and Rand was more of a homebody, so he didn't explore it much. That was Papa's hobby, not his.
I recommend we go to the library since it doesn't have windows and there's only one set of doors that open inwards. We can stack up books to block it.
Uncle Mirren glanced behind them again, probably to look for Rosalie and Ivarian. That's a good idea, and not just because Rand liked the library. He had fond memories of sneaking up on his uncle while he attended classes there.
What's going on?
Papa tapped his fingers on Rand's shoulder. His green eyes glowed as brightly as ever, but he looked as confused as Rand felt. Are you real? Rand asked as he stumbled to a halt because the question needed an immediate answer.
What do you think?
Papa was strangely talkative today as he patted his back.
Why are you staring at me?
Papa touched the thin scar on his face, even though the scar that ran from just above the corner of his left eye down to his chin was now a faint line. He was still sensitive about it all these years later. The scar was older than Rand was and so light that no one except Papa noticed it anymore. You're really back. Rand wrapped an arm around his father because the other arm was busy holding tightly to his uncle and Yup. Dad felt as solid as Uncle Mirren. I missed you so much. Rand wrinkled his nose. Papa smelled like dirt and sweat like usual. Since his magic didn't like water, he didn't bathe as often as he probably should. So Papa didn't always smell that great, but he was the best dad in the world despite that, so Rand ignored the smell. He probably didn't smell that fresh either. With Rosalie around, it was awkward to bathe. He didn't want her to see anything she shouldn't, especially since she was sweet on Ivarian, and he seemed to like her back. Rand wasn't sure if that liking actually was mutual because Ivarian barely spent any time with him. He'd also met Rosalie's mom, and no way would she get any reports about anything but his gentlemanly behavior toward Rosalie. Besides, Rosalie was like a sister. She'd stayed at Mount Eredrin when her mom was away often enough to feel like family. Memories of those visits stood out so clearly in his mind as he frowned. Why were they suddenly top of mind when he hadn't thought about those visits in years? Rand scowled as other questions crowded in. Why was I just looking for her? She hasn't visited in a while. Why did I think she was staying with us?
Are you sure you're all right?
Papa asked, and his question broke through the confusion in his head. Why wouldn't I be okay? Rand glanced around as a wish tugged on his gift. Did I wish for something open-ended? A wish would still draw on his power if it were still running. What did I wish for? While he figured that out, Rand needed to distract Papa so he didn't notice because that would definitely lead to a lecture, and he didn't want one right now. Where did you go before? That seemed like a logical question since it felt like Papa went away for a while, but Papa hated to leave Mount Eredrin. It was his home. The question shifted the conversation back to Papa, though, and that was the important part while Rand cast around for what he might have wished for.
I just went for a walk. Why is everyone running through the halls?
Papa scanned the hallway for a reason, and then his brow wrinkled as he called up the map that lived inside his head. Rand squashed the jealousy that rose within him. He had a map too, but it was vague compared to Dad's, and he only used it to find his family. It didn't work for anything else. We're running because demons are attacking Mount Eredrin. I slapped a wish on them that should keep them from hurting anybody while we get everyone to safety, but it won't last forever. They also broke some windows in our flat, but I can fix them later. Rand stared at the white rock floating over his head as he suddenly remembered everything again.
What are you talking about? I was just outside. I didn't see any demons. Are you sure you're okay?
Papa studied him.
I didn't see anything either.
Serena squeezed between them so his arm was around her instead of Papa, and she scowled up at Rand. He was never so glad to see his sister even if she was an annoying teenager who looked like a younger copy of Auntie Sullivan. But Auntie Sullivan and Papa were twins, so what else would Serena look like?
Hey, you weren't planning on fighting any demons without me, right?
Auntie Sullivan poked her head around Uncle Myron. You're back too. Rand let go of his uncle and his sister and flung his arms around his aunt.
Yeah, I had to run an errand for the Council of Angels, but I left rather dramatically, so I thought I should pop back in and make sure you're okay. You were a little worked up over it, more so than usual when I vanish.
Auntie Sullivan returned the hug.
That's because he's weird. Everyone knows older brothers are like that.
Serena shoved her shoulder-length dark hair behind her ear.
Oh, really? Did you know older brothers are weird?
Uncle Mirren elbowed Papa in the ribs, but Dad just shook his head instead of commenting on that. It was a wise decision since talkative people surrounded him, and they never let him get the last word about anything. But he didn't try either. I don't remember asking for your opinion. Rand released his aunt and rounded on his sister. She was 16 with Papa's glowing green eyes, and they brimmed with all his earth magic.
You don't realize you need it. That's why I volunteer it.
Serena patted his cheek.
But that's not why I sought you out. Rosalie said she's coming for a visit, but she's not here, and she should be. Her last letter was weeks ago. Have you seen her?
Yes, she was just here. Rand glanced around. Everyone stopped running, and that struck him as weird until he couldn't remember why he thought they should run away or what they should run away from. How odd. I knew a moment ago, but the reason left his head without leaving a clue behind. Rand glanced at his uncle for help, but Uncle Myron looked just as confused as he felt. And his magic was doing something too, but Rand didn't remember making any wishes today. So what was that wish tied to? Because it wasn't powering itself on his energy reserves. Auntie Sullivan must have realized they needed time to talk.
I'll help you look for her.
Auntie Sullivan caught Serena's arm and dragged his sister into the milling crowd of confused people. As soon as they were out of earshot, Dad turned back to face him.
What's really going on? You looked shocked to see me, but you saw me an hour ago, and everything was fine.
Papa faded away again as he talked. Dad reached for him, but Papa didn't notice he was disappearing. Papa just kept talking, and that was weird because he wasn't a talkative man. Rand staggered, and it felt like his head expanded when new memories sprouted in his mind. He suddenly had memories of two different lives, one where Papa was alive and well and questioning him about his behavior as usual, and one where Papa died when he was a child. Uncle Myron swayed. Rand caught his arm and steadied him. Thank God Uncle Myron didn't vanish too. Did you just get a bunch of memories with him without Dad? Rand didn't know what he hoped the answer would be.
Yeah, it's just like Rosalie said.
Uncle Mirren shook his head in confusion. Why did that happen now, though? Rosalie and Ivarian said they gained a head full of new memories too, but that was like a month ago or something. Rand didn't keep track of time all that well, but he didn't need to when Papa and Uncle Mirren were always reminding him what day of the week and month it was. And where was Rosalie right now?
What if something happened in the past that caused the timeline to split? What if there's now two different versions, one where the event happened and one where it didn't?
Uncle Mirren sat on the edge of a deep basin. A fountain shot water toward the ceiling, and of course the fountain stood in the middle of an intersection. The Litharians only put things in the way. You think the event is the demon invasion? Rand stuck his hands into the cold water and scooped up a handful. It was cold but refreshing.
Yeah, because in one set of memories, that invasion didn't happen. Your aunt shut the gateway before any demons could run through it.
Uncle Mirren rubbed his knee. But why did we get the second set of memories now and not when Rosalie and Avarian did? That part didn't make sense as Rand drank some more water.
I think something caused the two timelines to cross for a moment, but that's just a guess.
Uncle Myron scanned the people walking past them.
Where are Rosalie and Avarian?
I don't know. I'm not their keeper, you know. Rand sat down hard on the edge of the stone basin as new memories goes to the fore. I met Avarian when I was a kid, but he wasn't a kid then. He was the same age then as he is now. But I can't remember what happened after that. It was weird, though, because Avarian was probably a year younger than him, but the guy claimed he could go back in time. Maybe he could. Rand didn't see any proof of that yet, but what proof could Avarian show that he'd believe? If he went back in time, that would explain how I met him when I was a kid and he's an adult. If that memory was true, then it would also prove that Avarian could travel back in time.
Maybe from their perspective, that event didn't happen yet.
Uncle Mirren leaned on his cane as he rose. How's that even possible? That was one more reason Rand was glad he didn't have any time magic. I would never wish for it either. Time travel is just confusing.
I don't think they're here anymore.
Uncle Mirren studied the white rock floating above their heads. It still glowed as brightly as when Rand threw it into the air. But that didn't show how much time they had before the demons broke free from the wish that constrained them. Do you think Avarian took Rosalie back in time with him? Rand was glad they left him here. Time travel wasn't for him.
Yes, I do. I think that's why the two timelines crossed. Maybe them going back together is part of what fixes whatever went wrong.
Uncle Mirren shrugged. We'd better get to the library then. Maybe there are books there that can explain some of this. Rand rose and took his uncle's arm. All this talk about time travel is confusing. And his wish couldn't keep the demons from hurting people forever. It was already straining to control them. Since those demons poured all their magic into breaking the spell, Rand let the wish pull on his gift to sustain it. The longer it lasted, the more people would reach safety.
Then let's go find that book.
Uncle Mirren turned right and strode toward the library. That sounded like a plan to Rand. He fought the urge to skip all the way there so he could stay by his uncle's side. But happiness bubbled up inside him more with every step because he was one step closer to getting his family back, and that was an encouraging thought.
To be continued in Summon the Gods by Melinda Kucera, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy. Notes from the author Melinda Kucera on Gateway to Hell. Note 1. Hell's Time. This book follows two timelines. What happens in Hell is happening concurrently with the events in the His Angelic Keeper series, particularly with books 1 and 2. When Arginil and the Agent of Order see a girl and a dragon, Sovereign and Fae, the ex-goddess of fate, hacking at the gateway's tethers, they witness the events at the end of His Angelic Keeper hidden. In those moments, the two timelines in this book overlap. When Sovereign and Fae disappear, the two timelines diverged, leaving Arginil and the Agent of Order on the alternate timeline.
But His Angelic Keeper Hidden takes place concurrently with the Curse Breaker series, and Ran is 4 in those books.
That's correct. I didn't want to bog down the narrative by explaining this or calling attention to it, but there is no time in hell. It's always now.
How does that work?
If someone from the past and someone from the future went to hell, they could bump into each other because hell has no past, no present, and no future. Whenever you visit, it's always now. When you leave hell, you must make sure you return to your correct place in time and space. But it's really hard to do that. You can end up in the wrong time on Earth really easily. Unless you're a time god, you can't fix that. You can't go to hell or heaven and return right after you left, because to reach either realm, you must cross through the gray between, and time exists in the gray between. Time moves slower there, so that means more time passes on Earth while you're there.
That's why in the His Angelic Keeper series and the Curse Breaker series, Sylvan returned sometimes days or weeks after she left Earth. From her perspective, only a short amount of time passed. But from Rand's perspective, it's been a lot longer, and he complains about that too.
That's why trips to hell are usually one way. It's the same for heaven. It's always now there too. But the angels who go back and forth between heaven and earth don't have an issue with that because they are usually done with their assignments. So it doesn't matter if time passed on earth without them. They aren't returning there unless they get another Earth-side assignment.
So that's why the angels that come to fetch Sovereign are so annoyed at her. She's forcing them to leave their posts to take her back to the gray between. But time is passing on Earth while they aren't at their posts.
That's also why the scenes in hell aren't marked as happening in the past, because they aren't happening then. They're happening now.
Note 2. The two timelines. Mirren explains the two timelines pretty well. The timeline that all Melinda's other books are on is the one where Sarn is alive and driving Ran crazy as an adult. But Ran wouldn't have it any other way. So the scenes where Ran is grieving aren't the future of the Curse Breaker series. Ran's stuck with his overprotective and overpowered father for the rest of his life. But he wouldn't want it any other way.
He was raised by his uncle, Miran, in this alternate timeline. Since Sarn raised Miran from the cradle, there's not much difference between this version of Ran in this book and the version we'll eventually see later in the Curse Breaker series, except this Ran is still grieving for his father, and the Ran we'll see in future Curse Breaker books is most likely annoyed at his father because Sarn won't let him do something he really wants to do.
Rosalie is the headstrong daughter of Robin from the Robin of Larkspur series, and this trilogy is her fault. The proof is in Rogue Rescue, the fourth book in the Robin of Larkspur series, and in Rogue Gods, Summon the Gods, the sequel to this book. Robin is alive in the correct timeline. Rosalie has decades of arguments with her to come.
Ivarian's family is only dead in this alternative timeline. They are very much alive in the timeline the Cursebreaker series is set.
I hope you enjoyed Gateway to Hell by Melinda Kusira, Book 1 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy.
Note 3, Characters' Questions Answered. The characters asked a lot of questions in this book that are actually answered in other books, so here they are roughly in order of who asked what.
Ivarian asked what is a rider of the apocalypse and how can someone become one? That question is answered in detail in his Angelic Keeper Tempted. The scene where Ivarian meets Ran as a child also happens in Chasing Dragons, Book 11 of the Cursebreaker series.
For more adventures starring Ran and his father, start with Cursebreaker, Enchanted.
For more adventures with Robin and Rosalie, start the Robin of Larkspur series with Hunter's Night.
Rosalie is just a baby in the Robin of Larkspur series, but a version of Rosalie as an adult also appears in the fourth book in the series, Rogue Rescue. You will find out why in the sequel to this book, Summon the Gods. For more adventures starring Ran's aunt, Sovereign, check out the His Angelic Keeper series. Start with Book 1, His Angelic Keeper.
For more about Faye, the ex-goddess of fate and her many children, check out the His Angelic Keeper series. They play a large role in books 2 to 4 and beyond.
For more books featuring the ex-god of war, there will be another trilogy, tentatively titled Hell's Rebels, and a prequel trilogy about the fall that's tentatively titled Gods and Monsters. I have some of Gods and Monsters outlined already, and the ex-war god plays a large role in it. When will those books come out? Whenever the characters let me write them. Sign up for my weekly newsletter so the characters can tell you about my progress in writing their stories. They love to complain about me.
For more about the Agents of Chaos and the Agents of Order, see the His Angelic Keeper series. They both figure prominently in it, starting in Book 2.
For more angels than you can shake a stick at, also see the His Angelic Keeper series. Arginil doesn't appear in the His Angelic Keeper series, but some angels that the Shoestone showed him are in there, and some of them will appear in later books in the His Angelic Keeper series. He might show up in there too. Every angel so far has, so why not him?
You've been listening to Part 11 of Gateway to Hell, Book 1 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kusira. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the sequel publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full-cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.